The movie opens in Chicago, where the main character, Stacy DeNovo, runs a bakery along with her sous chef, Kevin, who is a single father. The bakery is quite popular with the locals, and with Christmas just around the corner, demand is high. In the next scene, Kevin's daughter, Olivia, comes into the store after finishing her dance practice. She urges her father to tell Stacy about their little secret. Turns out the sous chef had entered their Christmas castle cake in a baking contest hosted by the nation of Belgravia. After being impressed with their portfolio, the organizers have asked them to participate in the prestigious contest. Unfortunately, Stacy refuses the invitation, pointing out that they cannot close the shop for Christmas. It is revealed that she has transformed her life into an overly organized regiment ever since her breakup. An unannounced trip to Belgravia disrupts her sense of control, so she doesn't want it. Upon leaving work, Stacy donates some money to an old man on the street. He exclaims that Christmas is a magical time of the year. When Stacy replies that she wishes to have someone to spend it with, the mysterious old man prophesizes that Christmas wishes do come true. Only a few moments ahead, she runs into her ex-boyfriend, Paul. The two have a conversation about their time together, and Paul says he's been thinking about her. Right then, his new girlfriend arrives and embraces him. She reveals that the two of them are going to spend the holiday season at Paul's home. Offended, Stacy reveals that she too has big plans for Christmas. She impulsively decides that she's going to Belgravia. Later that week, Stacy, Kevin, and his daughter Olivia arrive at their beautiful bungalow in Belgravia. The little girl convinces the adults to take a quick tour of the local market for Christmas shopping. At one of the shops in the market, Stacy spots an old man who looks just like the stranger she met outside her shop. She asks if he was in Chicago last week, but the man answers that he wasn't. Their conversation is interrupted by Kevin, who points out the decorations in the market are over the top, even for Christmas. In response, the old man reveals it's because of a royal wedding down the week. The Prince of Belgravia is going to be married to the Duchess of Montenero, Margaret Delacourt. The trio then heads to Wembley Studios, where the preparations for the baking competitions are underway. Here, they run into Stacy's arch-nemesis and fellow competitor, Brianna Michaels. Turns out, Brianna won the very competition last year and plans to repeat the feat. Before leaving, she makes sure to drop wine on Stacy's apron and make it seem like an accident. As Stacy goes to clean up her apron, she accidentally bumps into another woman who is dressed in a pink blazer. To her surprise, the woman looks exactly like her, just with a shorter hairstyle. She just so happens to be Margaret Delacourt, the soon-to-be Princess of Belgravia. Stacy apologizes for the incident and introduces herself as a baker. However, the Duchess asks her to meet in an hour so that she can give her an expert opinion on the royal wedding cake. The baker agrees right away, and she promises to keep their encounter a secret. Meanwhile, Olivia wishes to get into the winter ballet program, but knows they cannot afford the admission fee. In the next scene, Margaret introduces Stacy to her personal assistant, Mrs. Donatelli. The assistant speculates that the Duchess and the baker from Chicago may be related through a distant relationship. However, this wedding cake meeting is actually a ruse, as Lady Delacourt doesn't need help with her cake. Rather, she proposes an idea to switch places with the baker for 2 days. She has spent all her life shackled by royal protocols and wants to understand what it's like to be a normal person. Stacy says yes, but on the condition that Kevin's daughter can be given a scholarship for the winter ballet program. Once both the women come to a complete agreement, the preparations for the switch begin with a basic exchange of information. The Duchess runs the baker through the long family tree of the royals, while Stacy shows photos of Kevin and Olivia to her. After a haircut and brief training on royal etiquette, the two look-alike swap clothes. Just then, Prince Edward knocks on the door, and Margaret quickly hides behind a sofa. Stacy, now disguised as the soon-to-be princess, comes face-to-face with the prince for the first time. However, she manages to carry on an awkward conversation with him and diverts his attention away from the sofa. The prince informs her that he's leaving for Spain the next day on a diplomatic visit. After he departs, the two women hug each other and swap their places for the next 2 days. Margaret heads to the quaint cottage, where she has a quick chat with Kevin. Meanwhile, Stacy begins adjusting to her twins' regal life. She speaks with Mrs. Donatelli, who reveals that the royal lady had it hard because both her parents died at an early age. Just before she can slip into bed, Prince Edward knocks on the door once again. He apologizes for his sudden foreign visit, but reiterates the importance of having a strict schedule and plans. The following day, Stacy wears the same pink blazer to her breakfast meeting with the king and queen. Her brief conversation starts to go south as the queen inquires about one of her distant relatives. On top of this, Edward suddenly arrives and joins the meal. He was meant to be away for his 2-day swap, but decided he should spend time with his wife-to-be instead. Afterwards, the prince presents Stacy with a tiara as an engagement gift before asking her to go on a horse riding trip around the countryside. While Edward is fooled, the king isn't so sure about this girl and asks one of his staff members, Frank, to spy on her. Back at the cottage, Margaret tries to cook breakfast but ends up completely burning the toast. Olivia becomes suspicious of her, as Stacy is a very competent pastry chef. Furthermore, she messes up their secret handshake, which makes the kid even more skeptical. In the meantime, Stacy meets the prince at the stables for the horse ride. But unlike the real Duchess, she doesn't even know how to get on a horse. Fumbling and falling, they finally start their ride towards the countryside. Unbeknownst to them, Frank is secretly spying on this new and rather flamboyant Duchess. Soon, they trot out to a hill overlooking a village below. The prince reveals that he comes here often when he needs to get away from his court duties. When Stacy tries to dig in a bit deeper, he suggests she not get involved in international politics. Offended, she replies that she doesn't plan to merely be a court ornament and storms back to the castle. After the horse riding adventure, Stacy phones her twin. Margaret confesses that Olivia has figured out their secret and she'll now be working with the kid on making the swap a success. However, the baker-turned-princess has other pressing concerns. Prince Edward has canceled his trip to Spain, and meanwhile, there is a charity ball tonight. She tells her royal counterpart to get back to the palace as their cover is sure to be blown. Completely ignoring her warnings, the Duchess says no to the plan. Following this, Margaret, Kevin, and Olivia head out to the market, abandoning their pre-planned schedule for the day. There, they click a photo together with Santa, and their wonderful day ends with a snow fight. Back at the palace, the prince apologizes to Stacy for being inconsiderate during their horse ride. He then tells her about his grandmother, who was always vocal about her opinions. Later that night, the duo joins the charity ball in the palace. Immediately upon arrival, Stacy asks the king and queen about the details of the homeless shelter this charity is supposedly for. The royals are taken aback by the sudden question and reply that a team look after such issues. Sensing some awkwardness in the air, Prince Edward tries to bail his fiancée out by asking her to play the piano for the attendees. Stacy, of course, doesn't know how to play the instrument, but the prince saves her once more by playing a duet, and the crowd claps for them. After the performance, Stacy runs outside as she fears she may have spoken too much in front of the king and the queen. The prince follows her soon after and encourages her to always speak her mind freely. The duo then shares a romantic dance before heading inside together. The next day, Stacy guilts Prince Edward into visiting the family shelter that the charity ball was in aid of. Upon arrival, she reads fairy tales to the homeless kids and spends time talking to them. After they learn that the shelter doesn't have enough budget to give Christmas presents to the kids, the duo goes to the nearest toy shop. While they collect several toys for the kids, Margaret and Kevin also arrive at the same store. However, the mysterious old man that we saw outside Stacy's shop arrives just in time and distracts Kevin. He asks the sous chef to help him push his car to the nearest garage and takes him away from the toy shop. The next day, Stacy and Prince Edward take the wrapped-up toys back to the homeless shelter. There, they distribute them among all the underprivileged children and even sing Christmas carols along with everyone else. The caretaker of the shelter thanks the royal visitors for their gracious gesture. The prince also vows to visit them more often so that he can spend time with the children. That night, at the cottage, Margaret puts Olivia to bed before going downstairs to have a chat with Kevin. She reveals that spending time with him has been one of the best experiences of her life. Surprised, The sous chef replies that she feels like a completely different person ever since they arrived at Belgravia. The duo then decides to watch a Christmas movie together. At the end of the movie, Margaret gets emotional and cries her heart out. Worried, Kevin comforts her and gives her a necklace. Inside, she finds a picture of them and Olivia, along with Santa. Kevin then confesses that he is beginning to see her as someone more than a friend. Touched, Margaret kisses him, but then asks to forget whatever happened between them. Knowing that Stacy will be back the next day, she doesn't want to offer him false hope. Similarly, in the palace, Prince Edward thanks Stacy for showing him the importance of reaching out to people. He then gives her a family heirloom, a pendant that belonged to his grandmother. Moreover, he reveals that he was previously skeptical about marrying her, as he had no idea who she was. But after today, he's completely sure he wants to spend the rest of his life with her. Overwhelmed, Stacy kisses the prince before nervously going back to her room. She cries behind closed doors, realizing that she'll have to go back to her ordinary life the next day. Just as the clock strikes midnight, Margaret arrives at the palace to take her place as the Duchess. Inside, the two women talk about their respective experiences the past 2 days. At this point, the Duchess is in love with Kevin, and Stacy loves the prince. However, both of them swap back to their original places. Unbeknownst to them, the king's private guard, Frank, sees them and snaps several photos of the two together. On the other end of the city, Brianna sneaks into Wembley Studios the same night and sabotages Stacy's mixture. The following morning, Stacy returns to the cottage, making breakfast for Kevin and her daughter. When Olivia arrives downstairs, she immediately realizes that Margaret has gone back to fulfill her royal duties. Disappointed, the kid wishes everyone could simply follow the path that makes them happy instead of doing things that they are meant to do. After a brief conversation, Stacy and Olivia prepare to head to the big baking contest. In the meantime, Frank rushes to the king's chambers to show him the photos he snapped last night. However, the queen stops him and demands to see the photos first, and he reluctantly hands her the images. After examining the photos privately, she comes to know about the existence of Stacy, the baker who looks exactly like the Duchess of Montenero. She strolls outside, contemplating what to do next, when suddenly, a gardener interrupts her train of thought. It's revealed that the gardener is the same mysterious old man who we saw outside Stacy's shop in Chicago, as well as in the market earlier. Upon seeing the photo of Stacy with the Duchess, he exclaims that the baker looks like a princess too. Without explaining anything further, he tips his hat and leaves, leaving Her Majesty deep in her thoughts. A few hours later, Margaret joins the king, the queen, and the prince for breakfast. Behind her back, the queen has revealed everything to the king, and the two have a secret plan to reunite the lovers to their rightful partners. She fakes illness and orders Edward and Margaret to attend the baking competition in her place. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the Duchess confesses everything to the prince in private, leaving him in shock. Meanwhile, Stacy and Kevin have a rough start to their competition. Due to Brianna's shenanigans, they're forced to puree strawberries by hand, lengthening their baking process. They barely manage to finish their giant castle-themed cake in time. Despite all the setbacks, the two bakers from Chicago emphatically win the first prize. As the celebrations begin, the host announces that the Queen of Belgravia sadly couldn't attend the award ceremony. In her stead, the winners will be facilitated by the Prince and the Duchess of Montenero. Noticing Edward on the stage, Stacy immediately tries to excuse herself from the studio, but Kevin forces her to go forward and accept the award. When they finally meet the royal couple, Kevin is stunned to see two women with exactly the same face. Fortunately, Prince Edward quickly takes control of the situation. He asks everyone to excuse them for a while and leads the four of them backstage. Here, Margaret explains how it was all her plan. She wanted to experience the feeling of leading an everyday life and asked to switch places with Stacy. She then adds that she loves being a normal person and confesses her feelings to a bamboozled Kevin. Taken aback by the confession, Kevin asks the prince if he's angry with his betrothed falling in love with an ordinary man. In response, Edward says he's completely fine, as he too is in love with a common person, Stacy. On the other hand, Stacy doesn't think it's a good idea for a prince to love an ordinary person. She leaves backstage and walks away to gather her things, but Edward stops her and promises to fight for his love as long as they are together. He then drops to his knees and proposes to her, suggesting a wedding in a year if they're still in love by that time. The movie ends with scenes from a year later. Stacy marries Prince Edward and becomes Princess of Belgravia. During the marriage ceremony, Margaret catches the bouquet, symbolizing that it's her turn next.